There are moments in life when everything changes, not because someone confesses, not because you catch a message on a phone, but because a casual sentence lands in the wrong way and suddenly rearranges your entire understanding of the past. I'm Mia, and this is the story of a man who realized his marriage was over not through evidence, but through a remark his own son assumed was already common knowledge. Robert was 60 years old and had been married for 30 years. He and his wife, Elaine, had built what most people would call a stable life. 2 children, now adults. A house paid nearly in full. Retirement accounts slowly growing. Holidays spent around the same oak table that had seen birthdays, graduations, and quiet Tuesday dinners when nothing special was happening except the comfort of routine. Their marriage was not passionate anymore, but it was steady. And for Robert, steady meant safe. He believed that love, after decades, naturally softened into companionship. There were no dramatic fights, no obvious fractures. If there was distance, he interpreted it as age. If there was silence, he interpreted it as peace. Elaine had changed over the years, but so had he. That was normal. People evolve. What he never considered was that evolution might not be happening in the same direction. It happened on an ordinary Sunday evening. Their son Matthew came over with his wife for dinner. The atmosphere was familiar and relaxed. They talked about work, about rising property taxes, about vacation plans that everyone claimed they were too busy to take. Halfway through the meal, Matthew laughed and said, "Well, at least once you two sort everything out, Mom won't have to sneak around anymore." The comment was casual. Almost careless. The kind of remark someone makes when they believe they're referencing something already understood. Robert didn't laugh. He looked at Elaine, expecting confusion or irritation. Instead, he saw something else. A brief stillness in her expression. A tightening around the mouth. The kind of pause that exists when someone has just realized a secret has slipped. Matthew noticed the silence and frowned. "Wait," he said, looking between them, "you didn't tell him?" That was the moment everything shifted. Not because Robert understood the details, but because he understood the imbalance. There was knowledge in the room that did not belong to him. When the door closed behind their son and daughter-in-law, the house felt unfamiliar. Robert didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply asked, "How long?" Elaine didn't answer immediately. She sat at the kitchen table and stared at her hands as if searching for a version of the truth that would cause the least damage. Finally, she said, "It's not what you think." Robert felt a heaviness settle in his chest. That sentence is rarely followed by innocence. He didn't ask for details. He asked something else. Who else knows? The silence that followed told him more than words could. If their son had felt comfortable referencing it, then this had not been hidden carefully. It had been visible. Visible enough for others to suspect. Visible enough that he, the husband, was the only one unaware. The humiliation of that realization was sharper than anger. The other man was Thomas. A widower. Someone who had attended their barbecues and holiday gatherings. Someone Robert had shaken hands with more times than he could count. Thomas had helped fix a fence once. Had stayed late after a dinner party, talking about retirement and travel plans. Elaine described it as something that just happened, something that began as emotional support and slowly crossed a boundary. She said she hadn't meant for it to go that far. She said she felt unseen. She said she hadn't known how to end it without destroying everything. Robert listened without interrupting. What unsettled him most was not the explanation, but the timeline. 18 months. A year and a half of shared holidays, shared family photos, shared meals, all while another man existed quietly in the background. And their son had noticed. That detail echoed in his mind more than anything else. That night Robert didn't sleep in the guest room. He didn't make a scene. He lay beside Elaine in the same bed they had shared for 3 decades and stared at the ceiling, listening to the ordinary sounds of the house. The refrigerator humming. The heater clicking on. Her breathing, steady and familiar. What disturbed him most was not the image of her with another man. It was the image of himself, shaking Thomas's hand, thanking him for bringing wine, asking about his late wife with sympathy. He replayed conversations that once felt harmless and now felt staged. Every memory seemed edited. He realized something unsettling: betrayal does not only change the present. It revises the past. Moments that once felt secure begin to look suspicious. Laughter feels rehearsed. Kindness feels strategic. In the morning, Elaine acted carefully, as though sudden gentleness might soften the reality. She made coffee the way she always had. She asked if he wanted toast. The domestic rhythm continued, but the meaning had drained out of it. Robert went to work and said nothing to anyone. He answered emails. Attended a meeting. Nodded at coworkers. All the while a single thought repeated quietly in his mind: I was the last to know. That thought was heavier than anger. A few days later, Robert did something unexpected. He called Thomas. Not to threaten him. Not to shout. Simply to hear his voice. They met in a quiet cafe across town. Neutral ground. Public enough to prevent theatrics. Thomas looked older than Robert remembered. More tired. He didn't deny anything. He didn't apologize dramatically either. He said it had grown complicated. He said he hadn't intended to hurt anyone. Robert listened. What struck him was how ordinary the man seemed. Not impressive. Not charismatic. Just available. That detail settled into Robert's mind with a dull weight. After 30 years of marriage, what replaced him wasn't brilliance. It was proximity. It was attention. It was time spent listening in the right moments. Before leaving, Robert said only one thing: you were a guest in my home. Thomas nodded but didn't respond. That silence confirmed what Robert already understood. The affair had not been reckless. It had been comfortable. The weeks that followed were not explosive. There were no broken dishes, no public accusations. Instead, there was distance. Robert began moving through the house differently. He stopped sitting in his usual chair. He stopped asking about Elaine's day. He noticed how much of their interaction had been habit rather than connection. Elaine suggested counseling. She said she wanted to repair what was broken. Robert didn't refuse, but he didn't agree either. Repair implied damage that was accidental. This felt deliberate. He found himself thinking less about the betrayal and more about identity. For 30 years, he had defined himself as a husband, a father, a provider. If the marriage dissolved, who was he beyond those roles? That question unsettled him more than the separation itself. The turning point did not come from another argument. It came quietly, in the garage. Robert stood looking at a wooden shelf Thomas had once helped install. At the time, it had felt neighborly. Now it felt intrusive. He didn't smash it in anger. He unscrewed it carefully and set it aside. The act was deliberate, almost methodical. Removing it wasn't about the wood. It was about reclaiming space. That evening he told Elaine he wanted a separation. He didn't accuse her again. He didn't demand explanations. He simply said he could not continue living in a house where he felt like the only person unaware of his own life. Elaine cried. She said she had never meant for it to end this way. She said she still cared for him. Robert believed her. Caring, he realized, is not the same as loyalty. When he told the children, he spoke calmly. He did not insult their mother. He did not recount details. He simply stated that the marriage had changed in ways he could not ignore. Matthew apologized repeatedly. He said he had assumed his father knew. Robert told him it wasn't his fault. And he meant it. In the months that followed, the house felt quieter but more honest. Painful, yes. But honest. Robert began small routines that belonged only to him. Morning walks without conversation. repainting a spare room, cooking meals he liked instead of meals that satisfied everyone else. He did not feel triumphant. He did not feel destroyed. He felt altered. There is a particular kind of betrayal that does not shatter loudly. It settles into the bones and forces a man to reconsider who he has been and what he has tolerated in the name of stability. Robert eventually understood something difficult. The most painful part was not losing Elaine. It was losing the version of himself who believed that long marriages protect you from humiliation. But they don't. Time does not guarantee loyalty. Proximity does not guarantee honesty. And silence does not always mean peace. Sometimes it means something has been happening quietly for longer than you realize. And the hardest moment is not the discovery. It is recognizing that everyone else saw it before you did. Sometimes the hardest part of betrayal isn't the shouting or the separation. It's the quiet realization that something was changing long before you noticed. And when that realization comes, you're left not only with questions about the relationship, but questions about yourself. Thank you for watching this story. If it resonated with you in any way, I would truly appreciate it if you subscribed to the channel. It helps more than you think, and it allows me to keep sharing stories like this. I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Robert's place? Would you have stayed? Confronted the other man differently? Or walked away the same way he did? And if you have your own story you'd like to share, you can write it in the comments too. I read everything. Take care of yourselves. See you in the next story. Bye.